Okay, welcome to part 2 of chapter 11. So I didn't want to advance the slide until you looked at this one more time. So again, we have the glomerulus, we have podocytes, specialized cells in there. They're going to help transport waste products into this space here. And you see this space is going to open up and we're going to see this long kind of winding tube. And it goes down, there's a loop, and there's another tube. And then finally, it terminates in what we're going to call the collecting duct. So let's take a look at the next slide. Okay, so this is a little bit of a simplified version of that previous slide. So let's just look again. Okay, this is the scanning electron micrograph in color, or probably stained, of that glomerular capsule. So remember, these is this kind of convoluted back and forth capillaries that are inside of our glomerular capsule. So this is what we really we're gonna think about where that first amount of filtration is going to occur. The nephron itself contains glomerulus, glomerular capsule. Then we have the proximal, or the closest convoluted tube to the glomerulus. So this is the proximal convoluted tubule. Then we have this loop. It's called the loop of Henle. So this descends, the other side ascends, and then we have what we call the distal convoluted tubule, and then finally the collecting duct. So you can see here is this arteriole bringing blood into the glomerulus. So the afferent arteriole brings blood into the glomerulus, and the blood that then is returning or coming out of that glomerulus is now going to be called the efferent. Here it is, efferent arteriole. And essentially, you notice that this arteriole becomes a network of capillaries, or what we call the peritubular capillary network, that is intertwined with the proximal, the distal tubules, and the loop of Henle. So essentially, before we commit this blood to just going back through the venule and eventually to the vein, we want to be sure about what we're actually going to be excreting. So we want to take a look at what's going on along these proximal distal tubules and the loop of Henle. You can pause and read this if you'd like. Okay, so I like this slide because it shows us again the picture or the figure of the nephron. And we want to begin to understand how is it that the design of the nephron is suitable to doing the things that we need the urinary system to do. So one of those things is what we call glomerular filtration. So essentially you can see here, water, urea, glucose, amino acids, uric acid, salts. They are pushed out preferentially. No, they're not preferentially. They are pushed out non-discriminatingly, however you say that, into the glomerular capsule, just like, see ya, bye-bye. So we're going to call this the glomerular filtrate. It doesn't mean that all this stuff is bad, or that that the concentrations are all that bad or good in our bloodstream. It just means this is where they're originally going to be filtered. Okay, so we're here in the glomerulus, inside the glomerular capsule. This afferent arteriole had brought these materials in here, and the podocytes are going to help, or going to facilitate the movement of these various products into the glomerular capsule. Then these materials are going to move through the proximal convoluted tubule. So this is the tube that's proximal or closest to the glomerulus. So let's just see what's going on here. In the green, we're going to see that as the materials are moving through this tube, that we are going to have what we call tubular reabsorption. So as you know, nutrient and salt molecules and that balance in the blood is super important for all kinds of activities, from the function of your skeletal muscle to your cardiac muscle. It just goes on and on and on and on. So we see that some of those nutrients and salt molecules are going to be actively reabsorbed from the convoluted tubule into that paratubular capillary network we see here. And when that happens, water flows with it. So this is one way that we are going to reabsorb water. Now you see, your book isn't going to get too detailed about this, but we also see in blue, we have the tubular secretion. So certain ions of molecules like hydrogen protons and the antibiotic penicillin are actively secreted. So this means we want to get rid of it from these convoluted tubules back into, let me say that a different way. Tubular secretion, we are going to move it from the paratubular network back into the convoluted tubules. And so what this means is that we are going to get rid of it. So this is when essentially the penicillin would be traveling through this convoluted tubule and then out the collecting duct. And we can see that also hydrogen ions are going to do that as well. So once all this has happened, the filtration, reabsorption, and secretion, then we're going to have those materials that definitely are going to be eliminated. Now, I know you're doing a urinalysis in your virtual lab, so that will give you an idea of all the things that are in your urine that are normal, and then what things are not normal, and then sometimes it's a matter of concentration. So we see here water, urea, uric acid, salts, ammonia, and creatinine. If you want to pause and read these slowly for your understanding, you can do that. Okay. All right, so we just summarized all of this. Okay, let's talk about diabetes. So what you already know about diabetes or diabetes mellitus is that essentially a person's going to have blood sugar above normal, and one of the simple tests is doing a urinalysis. And if there is glucose in the urine, that tells us that the body is not metabolizing the glucose properly, so it is, quote, spilling over into the urine, which essentially means that it's going to become part of the filtrate, and eventually then it's going to be part of the urine. So we know that glucose is a solute that is essentially going to raise osmolarity. So what this means is, go back to diffusion and osmosis, you're thinking about, okay, more solutes means it has less water, so it's going to draw water into it. So glucose is going to attract water into it. So one of the symptoms, well, three of the symptoms of diabetes mellitus: one, excessive thirst. Why? Because of two, excessive urination. And we also see, because they're not able to metabolize their glucose properly, they're most likely losing weight. So those are kind of the three top quintessential characteristics of someone with diabetes mellitus. Talked about that. So this is just a good overview, tying back to the urinary system and homeostasis. Yes, and I did want to talk about, I don't know if we need to talk about this again. You can skip this. It's not, I had it in here, but I don't think we need to be talking about that. It does say explain how disease of the kidney could affect homeostasis. So that one, these types of questions I'd like for you to dig into your textbook on your own. Maybe look at one of the diseases or disorders of kidney, associated with kidneys or associated with the urinary system, to come up with a good answer for that. Okay. All right, we'll see you. Chapter 17 is next.